This Final Cut Pro 10 Tour presentation is brought to you by the LumaForge Share Station, the world's best storage for Final Cut 10. For more information on how the Share Station can improve your workflow, head on over to lumaforge.com.
Hello everyone. Yes, I am Alex Gollner, Final Cut Pro 10 pundit and plugin maker, and recently, inspired by Tim Dashwood over there, been getting into VR video because he makes these amazing tools, and I thought I have to get involved in this, and I love explaining this kind of stuff. So recently, I did a VR project, a VR video project. So I'm going to be telling you about that project, and through that project, explain the basics of VR video and stitching and stuff like that. So, a few weeks ago, I was out in the Atlantic Ocean with the Necton mission for the XL Catlin Deep Ocean Survey. And what that was a ship here at the Atlantic, and they were sending submersibles off into the ocean. They look like this, little tiny submersibles. You can see there's enough for 2 people to go inside. And they went into the deep ocean, which is about 250 meters, 1,000 meters, or something like that. So you can see this little submersible. And what we took the opportunity to do is put little cameras like this, little 360 cameras like this, and bigger cameras into this environment, so people had the opportunity to go deep into the ocean and have the full 360 experience. So that's what I did a few weeks ago, and I'm going to be using this contest as an example of how to take this footage and how to work with it. So what is VR video? Well, as you may know, it's looking around inside a sphere of video that's been prepared in advance. So you're looking around and the video is playing and you can choose where to look. So what I'm going to show you now is this free VR player that works in Final Cut Pro 10. So you can use this plugin this application from Tim Dashwood to look at 360 content straight from the timeline. So here is my Final Cut Pro, and then I'm going to start the 360 VR viewer, which adds the extra window on top. And if I then press play in here, what I can do while the timeline is playing back down here, I can actually drag around and say, well, I don't want to look straight ahead, I can look here, or I can see that there's a submersible on the back of the deck, or I can see a submersible being launched, and here's one of the submersibles about to go under and stuff like that. But what I can do in the timeline is I can just change the edits as I want and scrub normally and stuff like that. So what this is Tim Dashwood's free player. So if you go to FX Factory, you can download this, and if you have this kind of footage, you can immediately start seeing the result of the 360 footage that you've got. The thing about 360 is that if it's a sphere of video, we don't have spherical displays. We don't have spherical cameras. What we have are rectangular screens, rectangular sensors. So what we need is a way of, and our software is used to dealing with rectangles. So what we need is a way of manipulating spheres of videos in rectangles. We are used to having globes, right? So this is our typical globe. We know our planet is spherical, right? And the idea is we always have to have maps, and we usually want them to be flat. We used to have globes, but now we have flat. So what we do is we take a sphere's worth of content and project it flat. This part of the map, when we distort a sphere into a rectangle, hasn't really been distorted very much. If you look at it, this doesn't look very different from that. But if you look at Greenland or Antarctica, Antarctica is this shape. So this area here is now a long area along the bottom, because essentially when we take a sphere and put it onto a rectangle, this single point, the South Pole, is this line all the way along the bottom of the map. So what this is called is an equirectangular projection. It's taking a sphere and putting it onto a rectangle. So I'm just going to play this timeline a bit in Final Cut Pro. So if we have a circle that's over Europe and then goes down to Africa, then we can just play it. Now the question is, if you have a circle going around Antarctica here, what would a circle look like on here, around Antarctica? Yes, it would actually have to be a line that goes right round the bottom, like this. So what I'm going to do is that what you need is a plugin. Let's see if this works. Okay, what I'm going to do is select it in here. This gives me a preview of what it would look like if I was looking through my equirectangular, looking through a viewer. And then I've got a plugin on here. If I actually select the effect that I've got applied to it. And what I can do is if I move this circle up to the map, you can see as we move up, looks perfectly okay going around Europe. I mean, so I should say real Europe. I have to not include the UK there anymore. But as you can see over here in this area, it's slightly distorted up here. But then if I move down, so what I'll do is, okay, let's see if I move the circle down so it's on Antarctica. So I move the circle down like this. You need plugins and tools that actually do this. So it's a totally normal circle when looking through the viewer, when people will eventually see the final video. But here it has to do with this constant distortion. So the dot, that red dot, becomes, at the right point, a line. Won't be able to, you can just about see it. If I make it larger, you'll be able to see there is a red line right along the bottom of here. That's the center of that circle. So that's equirectangular projection. So when a good test, if people know anything about, to find out if they know anything about VR, is asked if they know what equirectangular is. VR video has a standard. That's the amazing thing. There's lots of different kinds of cameras, lots of editing software. So all the production happens up here, and then it becomes a sphere of video which becomes equirectangular, like a single way of representing video. And then after that, all the ways of producing it get complicated. But there's a single point, equirectangular, where you've got a rectangle of content that you can work with. So VR video workflow is the specialized software and methods that deal with spherical views mapped onto rectangles. That's what it turns out to be, if you see what I mean. So there we are in the Atlantic, and we've got various different kinds of rigs, because in order to be able to get a sphere of video, you need to have multiple cameras all pointing out. So you've got this one, which had 30 cameras, believe it or not, which is 15 pointing in each direction, 15 pairs pointing each direction, which allows you to get a stereo effect. So you'll see that these two GoPros are next to each other and these two are next to each other, and the idea is that each of those represents your pair of eyes looking in each direction, but in 15 different directions. Times 2 is 30 files, 30 video files. Then you've got this one, which is 6 GoPros, but they're put inside a special rig called an Abyss rig, ABYSS, if I can spell Abyss. And what that is, it's got a special dome on it so that it deals with going underwater and dealing with the different refractive index of water as you go deeper and deeper, and also has to be able to go to 1,000 feet, so it has to be much more waterproof. And then on the inside of the submersibles, we put my little GoPro here, sorry, my little Kodak, which is a pair of cameras pointing backwards and forwards. So you go from 15, 6, 2 cameras. So what I'm going to do is show you some of the production associated with these 6 files that we've got here, associated with the 6 files that came out of these cameras. So on the front of the submersible, there was a long stick, which is technically called in VR video a stick. It's very technical. And on the end of it were these 6 cameras, which was this Abyss rig. And then the submersible would go down for 2 hours, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then we'd end up on our GoPro files with 6 files, which were an hour and a half long or something like that. And then what you end up with is this kind of thing. Here are the 6 views of the submersible as it was about to go underwater. So you've got this one, you can just about see the stick here, pointing towards the camera. And the angle of all the other ones is it can't see the stick. The art of setting up a rig is to make it so the thing holding up the rig is not too visible in all the different views, because you have to get rid of it at some point. In other words, the top of the submersible here, there's a stick sticking out of it. But here, there's a part of the top of the submersible and the stick is out that way. So if I use this piece of video and overlap it here, I'm kind of hiding this part of the stick. So the art of stitching is actually trying to use one part of other cameras to hide things that you don't necessarily want to see, which is usually tripods or other things. There's lots more to stitching than that, but that's part of it, if you see what I mean. So I can use a bit of this sky to cover over this bit of sky. And this is what you are kind of doing in stitching software. You're dealing with the edges. And also what happens, the stitching software is very clever. You don't even tell it how the cameras were arranged. It just recognizes the bits that are the same and then works out how they overlap. So I'll just press play, and you can see that what happens is as this stuff as the ship goes underwater. Eventually. So we're going underwater and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is go back along the timeline to the same shot that I used in the final event of the thing. And this is what essentially it looks like when you stitch it all together. Okay, so I used a bit of the other shot to hide the stick here. You can't really see it anymore. The idea is to make it so it was all taken with one camera. Remember, this point here along the bottom is looking straight down. So if I put the viewer and look straight down, then I'll see what I'll see if I look straight down, and that's the highest point. That's the sky. It's difficult. You can't see the distortion as much here because, of course, it's quite even as we go around here. So, what program do you use to combine these together? Use Kolor Auto Pano Video Pro. GoPro, the company needing to find itself new directions because people have stopped buying their action cameras because everyone who's going to buy one has bought one, is getting into 360 production. So they brought a company called Kolor that used to be in the world of making panoramas, picture panoramas, taking, say, 100 images and combining them together, still images, and making a big panorama out of them. But now they've been doing that and combining them together to do video. So that's where they come from. So their kind of software for doing stitching and combining stuff together is 10 years old or more. So essentially what happens is that you've got your clips, you import your 6 clips, you synchronize them together, that says synchro. So obviously they all start at different times and you synchronize them using audio and stuff like that. And then you stitch them together and it does a quick stitch. And then after a long while you get a real-time preview of where it is on the timeline. So when you choose edit, what you'll do is you're choosing which parts of which shot to combine together. And what that does is load up another picture editing program. And that stitch, that panorama, is then sent back to this program. So that's called Kolor Auto Pano Giga. And then you go into here. And you can actually see, if I go to this, is I can choose which parts are used in which. So this is the camera looking upwards, camera looking down. And this is how it combines together. Now the trick is I've got these little green dots and red dots, and what that does is it says, okay, I don't want this to be visible, this part of the shot, which is where the stick is. But I want all the submersible to be, I don't want it to use any of the other angles. I want this, because it was positioned in such a way to show the whole submersible really well. Pardon? Yes, so I position these things myself. So what I do is I have to give it a guide sometimes to say, okay, no, I don't use the other angles if possible for here. Definitely use this angle for here. So you have to, there's lots of human guiding required for stitching. And that's just for this part of the shot. I can go later in the timeline and then maybe something totally different is happening and I may need to do different stitches in different places. So this is a whole other area of skill that maybe editors don't want to do, because editors want to edit. All this is pre-production. When you get the footage is where you want to work. You want to just get to the equirectangular bit of footage and hey, I don't have to know about these problems. But sometimes you may be called upon to actually to do these things with 6 or maybe 15 or 30 cameras. This is just with 6, okay? So, simple as that. So, to go back to it, you've got VR video stitching. You do use Kolor Auto Pano Video Pro, or just Auto AVP, people know it as, and you have to get the Auto Pano Giga with it because that actually allows you to combine which shots go with which. It's really tuned for the PCs, but with the workgroup servers like Jellyfish, you can have some people working on the same media and stitching together stuff on PCs, producing equirectangular footage that then in Final Cut Pro you're combining together. And I'll come back to a little bit more on the workflow on that in a moment. So workgroup servers for this are absolutely fantastic. So Final Cut Pro 10 is the best NLE for doing VR video, partially because it's really smooth proxy workflow for high resolution video. The kind of minimum that most people do for VR video is 3840 by 1920, and the ratios are always rectangular. It's always twice the height to the width. So the height is 1920, that means we have to double it for the width, because that's just the way globes are. You know, that's essentially what you get. If you turn the sphere into a rectangle, this is the projection that you get. Has a really good ecosystem, and also Final Cut can go much higher, 8, 16K, that kind of stuff. And especially when you're doing VR video, you use compound clips, because high quality stitching is very slow. So what happens is, in the case of that submersible picture, what I do is say, okay, do an automatic stitch. I don't care about seeing the stick. I don't care about things appearing twice in different angles and all that kind of stuff. Just export the 2.5 hours of content that I've got from these 6 cameras. Render that out at 3 frames a second as it actually takes on this thing. Sometimes, you want it to be 10 times faster, but that's the speed of this computer. And I was doing this while I was on a ship in the Atlantic, So hopefully in October or whenever Apple decide to get back to the Mac, we'll see faster machines. But what you do in practice is that you do a quick stitch and you put it into a compound clip. Edit away with a compound clip, and then you have to tell your colleagues and your people saying, don't worry, I know you can see the person twice in this shot, we're going to fix that later. But the trick is, only once you've got your compound clip, and I'll show you when I did it on my timeline, I've been editing it away here in compound clips with this content here. So this is the submersible, if I go again, this will start playing, but this is the view straight ahead. This is the submersible behind us because the stick is on the kind of sticking out from here. And this is another submersible that's in the distance, and we're kind of going off in the distance like that. So if I press play. So this is as you can see, they're moving at about 0.5 kilometer an hour because that's how fast they have to move in order to carefully do a survey of the underwater. So I have to make a video, an action video. Look, fish. And this, in a moment, you may see the kind of fish disappear as they go to a different camera as they haven't been stitched or something like that. The problem with this environment, of course, is the fact that they don't happen to be, it's not as colorful as you might expect. And this doesn't look like Finding Nemo, unfortunately, because of course that was, yeah. So in here, what I'm doing is I'm actually turning the view so that the submersible seems to be in front of you, and it's slowly moving behind you. And the idea is that essentially the submersible happens to be doing a 180, and what I'm trying to make it do is so you're actually seeing straight ahead all the time, and the submersible's moving around. So I have to, in Final Cut Pro, say, okay, make it so that I'm looking at a different part of the sphere. It's a bit like, essentially, I'm turning the sphere slowly in Final Cut. So sometimes it's an editorial decision. You have to say, okay, I want people to slowly be looking in a different direction. So this is the kind of tools that you need in Final Cut sometimes to deal with the fact that, okay, part of this video I want the submersible to be in front, but sometimes I want what they're looking at to be in front. So these are story choices. You don't want to be making that in a compositing application like Nuke or editing software. You want it to be the software that you use to just do normal edits. So that's why you need the kind of plugins from Tim. So this compound clip has various stitches. This says you won't be able to see it, 9 minutes to 24 minutes, 28 minutes to 45 minutes, 45 minutes to 54 minutes. So these are quick stitches, sometimes with new, better stitches stuck in, to improve little moments. So I've got here where I was trying to deal with a difficult boundary here. Now I've got clip skimming on, so I'll be able to show you in a minute how this is me flailing about with Autopano Video Pro. So I'm on the low one, and then if I go to the upper one, you'll see that maybe if I make this window a little bit bigger, and go back to this. This is the original quick stitch, which is perfectly fine, but I'm having a problem with this border here. It's kind of going up to a little faded nothing here. I'm having problems. This camera was just very dark, and the GoPro was just going, I don't have any light here, I'm just going to assume it's just dark, I'm not going to try and up the blacks. And of course the stitching software has to deal with all the balancing of light. And these GoPros don't even know they're on the same rig, so they don't know to do equal balance of light and color. You have to do that afterwards. So here's the problem, around there. So this is my quick stitch, and then I've smoothed it out a little bit here. So here's a little bit smoother. But now this sample place where they pick up with this arm, they put samples that they find in the deep ocean, that's become a bit blurred because I've softened this edge here. And also up here, this is softer. And then I try it again. Still, it's a different blur here. This is stronger. So what I'm doing is I'm using the compound clip, and I don't have to worry about where I used it on my production timeline, because what I'm doing is making little changes to the moments within from the quick stitch and putting better stitches in. So this is why compound clips are really useful, and that's why multiple resolutions dealing with multiple resolutions is not what VR video is about. Is actually having very long, hard to generate files and choosing parts and replacing parts of them, and then the editing software just to go, fine, okay, you've replaced these 1700 frames in the middle of a 19,000 frame shot, that's fine, I'll just include that in my timeline. So using Tim Dashwood's toolbox, You can have real-time timeline playback. In other words, you can see swipe around in the timeline. This is a free as part of the toolbox. But then you need effects that are aware of equirectangular, the nature of the distortion of the video. So we've seen this in terms of an application that floats on top of Final Cut Pro and you can play it. But also, sometimes what happens is you've got a pretty good video and somebody says, have you got the shot of just when the submersible, that angle was really fantastic. And they go, yeah, but can you make it into a flat video? Then you use the HMD, which stands for head-mounted display, which is what this is, or this is. This is when you go to VR video, they call them head-mounted displays because they're a display that you mount on your head. You can get a flat video out of a 360, so instead of you do one shoot and you get a flat video out of it as well, which is very good for budgets and stuff like that. But sometimes what you'll do, I won't have time to show you, is you can put graphics on the inside of the sphere, or video, or whatever you want can be on the inside. So I could have labeled the submarine as it was going around, or other information, or other pieces of video. And then you need a plugin to do that, because it has to be able to distort it. If I choose to put that content right down, face down, I have to be able to completely distort it. So remember how a single line, a circle turned into a line, well, that distorts video and everything in that way as well. And sometimes it's quite useful to have useful information that you may want to have in your video, but you don't want it to be in somebody's way. So you look down every time you want to find out more. Okay, there it all is. Could be some graphics, text, other things, whatever you like. And then also, due to the fact that blurs and glows and noise reduction happen, that line is 1 pixel, this line is every single pixel. You actually have to have plugins that are aware of doing it, applying these effects differently across the different parts of the image. So, say you use Final Cut Pro and you worked away. Final Cut Pro doesn't even know you're doing 360 video. All it is dealing with rectangles of video. So you export as normal. But then for YouTube, they have a free app that says, okay, this is a 360 video. And that means if you use YouTube on iOS or Android, the app, that you can look around inside the sphere just by holding up your phone and doing this. Or if it's inside one of these little things, you can look around. And you can even say whether it's 3D or other stuff, and also deal with audio as well and say that you've got directional audio. Or also, you can look at YouTube videos on Chrome browser on the Mac, both on the YouTube site or wherever they're embedded, and you can look at, swipe around. Facebook, you just say this video is recording 360. And also separately from GoPro, there's a GoPro VR player, so you can send that to a client and say, here's the file, drop it on here, swipe around, see what you think, should we overlay a graphic here, that kind of stuff. So you've got stuff to share with people. Also works on iPhone, and so it works on iOS and Android as well as on your Mac and PC. So that's pretty useful for dealing with the client. And separately, what do you do with this stuff? You might want to make yourself, or propose, you can do video for custom apps. So even though you may not be doing the full-on VR experience, interactive VR, there's certainly things where you could say, okay, I can create a sphere of video and you can do whatever you want with your app to say, okay, I'm from a museum, I can overlay lots of stuff that people can touch and stuff like that. So remember, you could be making video that goes into other people's productions when doing VR video. So the good thing about tools like this from Dashwood is the fact that your client can sit next to you while you're making changes, which is different from going to a separate app and doing lots of changes and then seeing what they think and rendering and exporting it. And you can try a free watermark version from FX Factory or Dashwood3D.com. I think Dashwood3D.com. Yeah, that works. The maker of the plugins is right here, so I better get it right. I don't know if this is the correct price.
That's US dollar.
All right, okay, sorry, yeah. 800 euros. Wow, cool. So this, what I'm talking about is the professional choice because it deals with high-end stereo production. Now, stereo, as you may or may not know, is when you've got a different image sent to each eye. In other words, what normal people would call 3D. So this is the full-on, does everything, kind of everything you might want to do with 360. And also, Tim will keep on updating it as fashions change because it's a very faddy type stage we're at the moment. But you get free updates forever. So that was the complete VR video workflow. Thank you very much.